To Growing Roses, the workshop designed to erase the myth that the world's favorite flower is a finicky one in the garden. I'm Maureen Gilmer, and in today's show we'll take a look at how to integrate roses into the landscape. Now, roses can be a great landscape solution to provide form and color to any garden. Claire Martin is the Rosarian at the renowned Huntington Botanical Gardens in San Marino, California. So let's join him at the garden and ask him to give us a little background on landscape roses.
One of the great things about modern gardening is that roses just don't have to be right in the rose garden. They can be used as part of the landscape. So you can plant them as foundation plants around the house. You can mix them up into other shrubs. If you have a border along a wall or part of the garden with some shrubs, you can mix roses into that. So the uses of roses have really expanded, especially here in the West in the United States. There are a lot of new shrub roses. Shrub's a pretty broad category. You can have shrub roses anything from a few inches tall right up to something like Graham Thomas that'll probably grow 12 or 15 feet tall. Mainly some of the floribundas are great. A floribunda is only slightly different than a hybrid tea, but if you think of a hybrid tea as being a florist rose, one large flower at the end of a long stem, a floribunda tends to be smaller flowered and in big clusters. So if you look at Sexy Rexy here, you can see these big candelabra clusters that are just full of flowers, and that's a floribunda. If you really want to get this cluster to flower perfectly, you remove the king bud when it's just starting to form, back when there's just very small buds, and if you pop this one out, all of these flowers will open up at the same time, so you have just a perfect cluster. Among the most prominent landscape rose is the great floribunda iceberg. It has only come in white up to now, but there's a brilliant pink iceberg that's really as good as white iceberg. The nice thing about iceberg is it grows up to a certain height and then sort of cascades out, so it has a very soft landscape type growth that's a shrubby type growth that's very pleasing. A lot of people are starting to use landscape roses, ground cover roses. These are roses that might get 6 or 8 inches tall. A few will get 3 or 4 feet tall. One way you could use roses along a walkway is to put the lowest rose right on the edge of the walkway. So you could use a ground cover rose or a very small shrub rose. Then you can tier them up so you have a low rose, a sort of a medium-high floribunda, and then a nice taller rose at the outside. And so you have this sort of progression of sizes and also colors. When looking for a new landscape rose, pick them by their size. And there's nothing more disappointing to think you're going to get a rose that's going to grow about 3 or 4 feet tall and plant something which grows 12 feet in a year. So you want to be a little selective on choosing roses for the landscape, but once you know the parameters, the size of the plant that you want, there are hundreds of selections today.
So Claire, there's lots of talk about disease resistance and self-claiming roses. Can you tell us a little about these terms?
Well, Maureen, landscape roses, one of the things that they're selected for is a higher degree of disease resistance. Modern hybridizers have become very aware that people don't want to spray a lot of chemicals in their gardens, so they're selecting roses that have a stronger amount of disease resistance. That doesn't mean that they won't have a little mildew or some other problems at different times, but they'll have a minimal amount of problem, hopefully. The other nice thing about a lot of the landscape roses are that they self-clean themselves. In other words, when they finish flowering, the petals drop cleanly away from the bloom, and they'll regrow around that with new growth and then bloom above that. Iceberg does that beautifully, but you do kind of want to deadhead them still, so you keep them a little cleaner, but they really are very nice minimal care roses in the landscape.
Thanks, Claire. That was great. Now don't go away. We're going to show you how to plant some carefree landscape roses in your garden next. Roses. We're here in our demo garden once again, and today's how-to demonstration is a really important one for growing gorgeous roses. So we're going to learn how to plant roses properly for their best effect in the landscape. Now, roses do need a little more TLC than most plants, but they're really not too difficult, especially if you begin with all the right ingredients. So first off, I want you to understand how we're using roses here. And if you see this nice big bed of red flower carpet roses, you see that we've actually used them as a massed ground cover. And this is one of many types of new generation roses that don't have disease problems, they don't require pruning, and we treat them as we would any other shrub in the landscape. You can see that they're starting to send out these long extensions, and eventually this will fill in and it will be solid roses and red blossoms and foliage. So I'm going to show you the tricks to really putting together something that looks fabulous with roses with very little effort, so you can get them in the ground the right way. Now once you get your roses home, you can do a lot to make sure that they grow successfully for you. Now I've dug a pretty basic little hole, and note that these are container grown roses. That means that they're grown just like this in a container. Now here I have another flower carpet rose in its bare root form. Obviously this is a smaller plant than this one, but it will be a little bit less expensive and you can get it in the ground sooner. They're grafted right there onto the rootstock, very much like other types of roses, but that's what they look like. Container grown roses are really very easy to plant, but I like to beef up the soil as much as possible because, like human beings, they really benefit from a lot of extra nutrition. Now if we use bone meal, you see it's 11% phosphorus, which stimulates root development, and it'll help your plant get off to a faster start. This is an organic product, and it's a little bit slow release, but for those of you that want to garden organically, this is a really good choice. So for a container plant this size, a handful is all you need. I have planting mix here. It's a soil conditioner, but you can use compost too. They're sort of either or, it doesn't matter, whatever you have available. And what this does is it adds organic matter to the soil. Now you see the level of the soil inside the pot? This is your key to planting depth on this rose. You want the level of the soil in the pot to equal the level of the soil in the surrounding edges of your planting hole. If it's too high, the fine surface roots that are in the top of this root ball will be exposed by water and rain, and they'll die because they're too dry. If you plant it too low, you can risk having problems with a rotting graft union, and the rose may actually root higher up, but it's better just to plant it at the level that it's used to in its nursery pot. You see all the little fine roots here. And so I'm just going to loosen this up a little bit on the bottom so that all that phosphate goes to work on these newly exposed root ends.
The next step is to backfill.
I'm also going to put a little basin around this rose so that I can give it some really heavy flooding after I water it, because I want to collapse all the air pockets around that root ball. I have some finished mulch. Now this is not to be confused with the planting mix I just used. You notice the planting mix is very fine, the mulch is very coarse. Mulch goes on top, planting mix and compost goes in the soil itself. The mulch is going to keep the roots cooler. It's going to prevent moisture from evaporating from the top of the soil. It's kind of like tucking it into bed at night. And this is really important if you live in a very hot climate, because it'll reduce the water consumption on this plant. It also reduces weeds. It even adds some organic matter to the soil. Okay, then when we water it in. Don't spray the plant, because we don't like to water them in the sun. And that's something important to know. If you have sprinklers, don't let the sprinklers water the rose in the evening. Set your sprinklers for early morning so that the moisture on the leaves can evaporate immediately, and that reduces the chance for disease. So now I'm going to plant the rest of this space with these beautiful flower carpets and our knockout roses. So we're using our taller roses here, which will make a nice little hedge and cover up the edge of the sidewalk. And then our carpet roses will just spill out over the hillside and connect with those that are pre-existing. And really, that's how to plant roses in your landscape.
When Growing Roses returns, we'll show you 3 different ways to incorporate roses into your garden.
Good times.
To Growing Roses. Victor Lang has created a spectacular garden in Pasadena, California that's filled with roses used in the landscape style. He has some great tips on growing roses this way, and he ought to know he's been gardening since the early 40s.
This is really a beautiful example, Victor, of how to use roses in the landscape.
Yes,
Now, obviously this olive tree was here before.
way before.
Now, typically, planting roses under trees is a no-no. But in this case, you've really made it work.
It works because the sun comes, this is high noon.
When you have a rose like this in the landscape, do you feed it differently than you do everything else?
They survive.
And are these on regular sprinklers?
The roses are being hand watered.
And so you use a water wand and you get back in there and flood them?
Exactly.
So
Yes.
how often do you water the roses to compensate for their increased water demands?
That depends on the weather and the rains we have.
Now, if our viewers wanted to use roses like this in the landscape, what groups or varieties would you recommend to them for this kind of an mixed border application?
You can use, there is a whole series of simplicity. There is a yellow, pink, white, and magenta simplicity, and that works extremely well, even as a hedge rose, and also disease resistant, like this iceberg here.
Excellent. So judging by these, this is a really good deal. I never would have thought that you could put a drought-tolerant Mediterranean border and fill it with roses and really make it work like that.
It does work.
Now, I saw at the other end of the garden another example where you have a beautiful perennial border, and then you've transitioned right into the roses as part of that whole landscape.
Exactly.
Let's take a look at them.
All right.
I looked at these little columbines. They're just
Yes.
fabulous. God, this is fabulous. Look at how you've integrated this into the landscape.
This is a perfect example of another way to use roses in the landscape. This is a formal collector's garden where the owner has planted masses of roses together to provide a powerful and colorful statement.
Now, all these roses look really good. I see no signs of bugs. Explain to me what you do to keep them looking so great.
After pruning, which takes place like mid-January, and it goes for a couple of weeks due to the amount. There are only like 645 rose bushes. And when they have about 2.5 inch of new growth, I use a systemic fertilizer.
Systemic fertilizers contain chemicals which keep bugs away. The chemicals are absorbed through the root system and distributed to the foliage.
Now, systemic fertilizer would have the same nutrient content as any other kind of fertilizer.
It has also, it's a combination of fertilizer and the chemical.
So actually the whole plant then becomes distasteful to insects.
Exactly.
Now, Victor, when you first started this garden, what was the soil like here?
Excellent. It's a rather sandy soil.
So people that have sandy soils like this, they would have to apply more fertilizer more frequently.
And more water.
Victor, I saw some fabulous rose arches at the other end of the garden. Let's take a look at those.
All right.
I just love this arch, and this is a really good example for people to see about how to get roses into your landscape without giving up any space.
And this is one of my very favorite roses. It's Sally Holmes, and in normal weather, which is between 60s and 75, every rose will actually hang on for at least a month, which is unusual.
And this is a really good example of a very vigorous rose that does real well on these arches.
Yes.
Well, thanks for letting us come into your garden, Victor.
You're very welcome.
It's been fabulous. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Growing Roses will be right back. Now, roses are notoriously heavy feeding plants. So knowing what to feed and when to feed are the building blocks of absolute success with these plants. So I'm going to give you the rundown on this very great array of products that you're likely to encounter at any home improvement store or garden center. The first thing you always want to look for in any kind of fertilizer product is the numbers. These are very important. And there'll always be 3. In this case, the 3 numbers are 10, 12, 10. That means that this product by weight is always 10% nitrogen, 12% phosphorus, 10% potassium. Generally speaking, the nitrogen is responsible for leaf and stem growth. Phosphorus and potassium are related to root, fruit, and flower development. Here's another rose formula fertilizer by a different manufacturer, and this one is 15, 5, 13. So how weird is that? This has 50% more nitrogen in it by weight than this one does. It only has 5% phosphorus compared to 12 here, so it's half as much phosphorus. And then it's just slightly more potassium. Because as you can see, rose formulas seem to be rather arbitrary. So keep that in mind. I personally, I'll just go for a standard 16/16 on everything. If you use a product like this, you have to take these little granules and distribute them around the plant and then cultivate them into the soil and water them, and they disintegrate and then percolate down into the soil with the water gradually. But if you've got heavy clay soil, what often happens is that these start to dissolve, but so little water is percolating down into the soil that it becomes really heavily concentrated on the surface and nothing is getting down to the roots. So the solution to that is my favorite product, Miracle Grow. This is Miracle Grow's formula, and its numbers are 18, 24, 16. That's like way more than both of these put together. It's very concentrated, but because it's already diluted when you apply it to the plant, it will move right down into those clay soils, and you can deliver a great deal of nutrient down into the root zone very quickly and easily. Now, for long-term feeding, this Osmocote has been on the market for years, and nursery people have used it because they can put Osmocote granules in and around the plant, and every time you water, a little bit more disintegrates into the soil. Unlike this, granules here, which are fairly rapid to dissolve, these can be very slow and can take weeks or months to dissolve. So every time you water or every time your sprinklers go on, a little bit more fertilizer is being put into the soil. So this is a really good product if you don't have a lot of time to spend in the garden. And you want to make sure that your roses have even nutrition. And then if you want to go to really specialty fertilizers, superphosphate is very important at planting time if you have acidic soils. If you have acid soils, it affects how the plant can take up nitrogen. So you give it superphosphate, and this product, 0250, unlocks the nitrogen in the soil and makes it very accessible to your plants. So now you know how to give your roses a balanced diet for healthy growth and tons of blooms. For more about roses on this and any of our other workshop shows, log on to DIYnet.com. I'm Maureen Gilmer. Thanks for watching.